Okay, so we're going to start with TH1 here. You can kind of think of this as basically, think of it like the tree trunk for the whole thing. It kind of starts here, everything kind of branches out from there. So we're working on the driver's side, working on the C-pillar, kind of along this line here, and we're going to be using some of these factory holes as indexing points with this piece here. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that we're working with the right factory holes when we line this piece up. Okay, so I've got TH1 clamped up here. Just sort of a pro tip here. If you have a clamp about this size, you want to try to stick the end of the clamp in this OEM rectangular hole here before you put the piece in there, and then slide it in, then clamp it down. If you have an extra set of hands, that is also really helpful. But we want to just sort of identify which OEM holes we're going to use to index. And you can mark those. We can mark them with tape or whatever you need to do. So the first one is right underneath where it says TH1. You'll see a factory hole lined up just behind that piece. All right, and this piece kind of it almost finds its own home using this cutout for the window cavity. There's a little bump out for the frame down here, which we'll show, and then we're identifying these holes. So anyway. The first one is right here, like I said, under TH1. So I just put a little piece of tape there. Just once I take this piece away, so it's just a marker for which hole I'm working with. All right, and then down here, there's our second indexing point right here. Little kind of bump out in our piece, and you'll see it lines up over an OEM hole there. And then at the very bottom, this hole right here, there's another OEM hole. Kind of move it aside, you can see there's this kind of little tab here. That hole right there. So what we're doing with those holes, once we take this orange piece away, is we're going to open them up with our 25/64 drill bit to open them up for setting a riv nut. And then there's one last thing we need to do before we take this piece away. Is there's some of these cinch nuts in this component as well, and we need the cinch nuts to have a place to go behind because they kind of protrude off the back of this piece, and we need this piece to lay flat. So right here where these cinch nuts are. And we need to stick like, you can stick a little drill bit, you can stick a little pin, whatever it might be. But basically what we're doing is marking where that is. This one right here above our indexing hole, kind of up and to the right slightly, and then at the very bottom. All right, and we're just gonna stick something through the hole, scratch up the paint a little bit. You could use the one of the 3/16 rivets. The pin is actually sharp enough to do that. And we're gonna come back through and drill a big hole to allow the cinch nut to recess in and allow the piece to lay flat. Okay, so a couple things I wanted to point out. You can see how close these two OEM holes are to each other. So I wanted to point out it is this one that we're drilling out, not this one. All right, so when you do your tape or whatever you're doing, just make sure you take note of that and drill out the right one. Second indexing hole for the riv nut there. And then third one down here. All right, and then these are where we stuck our little punch through. We actually stuck a punch through the cinch nut, smacked it with a mallet, and then scratched it a little bit too so we could see it. You'll notice this one's kind of right on this factory crease. It's okay because we're not setting a riv nut there. We're gonna take an oversized bit for these holes, a step bit, whatever you have, something quite big just to give you, a big margin for that to fit through. Open that up so the cinch nut sits in there, and then the other one right there.
After we drill, we always deburr the holes that are going to receive riv nuts. Clean them up before adding rust preventative. Then we have to open up the holes where the cinch nuts are going to go. So we're using a step bit. We did use a punch, so it should drill and clean. And down here. This This one's a little trickier. The kit will include the small jug of rust preventative and this brush. And every hole drilled in the van gets this treatment. You can be somewhat generous, just make sure you get the backside and the full perimeter.
Okay, so we're going to get into setting our first few rivnuts of the kit. There's one thing that I wanted to mention, and that's if you haven't worked with a rivnut setter before, it takes a little bit of getting used to. It's an interesting piece of hardware, so that's what the rivnut looks like. It basically works like a rivet. It compresses and mushrooms the backside and kind of clamps the two pieces of material together. It's important that you might practice with this a little bit first and get the settings on the tool proper. So a good thing to do is actually save the offcut for when you do your fan and drill a couple holes in that and try to set some rivnuts, and then sort of start to see how the hardware mushrooms out and stuff, and just kind of get used to it, because it's way easier to take care of that off the get-go than start setting stuff and have one set improperly and need to go back through and drill it out. So just wanted to give you guys a tip on that. Okay, so we set a couple of our indexing points, and now we're going to go back through and open up the rest of the 25/64 size holes for our rivnuts. A few pro tips: the drill bits that are included in the kit are good quality cobalt drill bits, so they're sharp and they'll stay sharp. But you are drilling through metal, so the name of the game is you don't need to get a whole lot of speed with your drill bit, and you want to apply some good pressure behind it. And that should cut through pretty cleanly and pretty easily. The other thing to think about is that we're kind of leaving the top, open. We're going to go in succession from the bottom up, and the reason for that is when we set the rivnuts, it's contouring to the van. And then also, after you drill these holes, we want to be able to kind of pull this back a little bit and get an air tool in there, something like that. You can blow in there, but you're just trying to get the metal tailings out from behind the piece after you drill, so we don't have rust issues later on. So we're going to kind of go work up in this direction. Obviously we don't have any in this section, and then we're going to hit this one and kind of work down in this direction. That lowest first indexing point that we drilled open the factory hole, we didn't connect a rivnut to that yet. We'll kind of do that with the rest of them that we're doing here.
So Jeff got that one. I'm going to work up, pull out the tailings, and then we'll come back and hit it with the rust preventative. These upper wall sections are double thickness, so make sure you paint all the way back in there. Try to get behind it, and again, just be generous. It will dry clear eventually. Okay, before we set the rivnuts, we're just going to give it a quick blowout, make sure we're not leaving any metal behind. And we're going to go ahead and set the first two on this piece. Okay, 3 rivnuts set up top. Now we're coming down below the one that we set previously, and we've got a couple more to go. We just proceed on the same program. Section here we have to make sure we accommodate the curve. So make sure you push in on the steel A-frame as you set each rib nut.
Okay, so next we just need to finish off this piece with a couple of pop rivets. So we've got our 3/16 inch stainless steel pop rivets. There's 3 particular spots on this piece where they're gonna come into play. That's down low here. There's 2 spots here, and then 1 spot up here on this little kind of dog leg that starts to go backwards. So with these holes, you know, basically you can test to make sure that they're the proper size for these rib nuts, or sorry, for the rivets, and by just sticking it in there. And if you have, if they go through, then you know you're good to go. If they're too, if the holes are too small, it's meant for something else. If they're way too big and it's sloppy, it's meant for a bigger size piece of hardware. So we're gonna go through, pop holes for those rivets, and then set these. Okay, and just one more note, it actually appears that there's another factory hole that we weren't seeing on a different build. So there's one rivet hole down here where there's a hole behind it. So you won't use that rivet hole, don't worry about it. Set them everywhere else that you can, and that's gonna be plenty to hold the piece in place. Okay, the nice thing to do, best thing to do with these rivets for the rust preventative is you can actually just kind of take your little bottle of rust prevent and dip the end of the rivet in it, like that, so you get a little bit on the end of it, and then just pop it right in the hole, and the rust preventative goes with it. That. Just like the rib nuts, you want to make sure that you're putting good pressure on it, pressing the piece right up against the skin of the van. And the last step for TH1 is to drill and set these 3 rivets kind of on the inside of the front of the window bay here. Okay, so we moved on to TH2, the rear vertical piece right inside the rear door. Same as the TH1 piece, there's going to be a factory hole that we're going to need to index from. This piece on TH2, so basically where you see TH2, the next rib nut hole up is the hole that we're referencing, and there's a factory hole just behind that we're going to end up drilling out and setting our first rib nut. That's going to allow this piece to kind of hang in place and allow us to do the rest of what we're doing. You know, just another quick kind of check on your measurement is you can kind of use this horizontal line in reference against kind of the similar connection point at the front. But anyways, this hole against the little factory hole behind that. One thing we forgot to film on this piece, on TH2, the aft piece on the driver's side, is where these cinch nuts, these PEM nuts are. You do, before you set this piece permanently, you do need to get behind there with a step bit and drill out the van body. And it's not for the PEM nut itself, it's for when the bolt goes through the track and into that PEM nut, it needs to have a place to go before it hits the van body. So make sure before you set all the rib nuts, you go in there and drill an access hole for the end of the bolt to go through. Okay, next up we're going to go in sequence with these rivet holes kind of on the inside of the dish of this window bay here. And so this piece needs to basically lay flat up inside this window pocket. So we'll start at the top, work our way down, and put this piece kind of vertically up against the back of the van here, which will index it properly for the horizontal pieces to come in after that. So a quick little note that I wanted to give you guys. This particular index hole, you can see it's not quite lined up with a factory hole anymore. We're making an update to the kit. There's going to be a rivet hole. This isn't actually capturing L-track, and this was more meant to hold the A-frame nice and secure and flush against the skin of the van. So anyway, for those of you that don't have a rivet hole here, you can just drill a 3/16 inch hole, just like we did, parallel with this hole, and set a rivet. For future kits, there will be a pre-drilled 3/16 inch hole here for your reference. Drill through the skin of the van and set a rivet there.
Okay, the bottom three on number 2, we're just going to continue the process. Drill, deburr, paint, riv nut. Starting from the top and then trying to clear out the debris from behind after each one.
Of those two right there. And this indexing point right here, little tab with the hole, take it away, you can see kind of where it's lining up to. Back in place, lines up over there, so it's kind of hugging this this little bracket here. Okay, and on the passenger side, it's the same exact procedure as you would do on the driver's side. The pieces are mirror images and you work from forward back just like normal. The only real difference is that this lower horizontal is another piece of flat steel. There's not the adjuster bracket at the very back. So you're just using it just like you did with the upper horizontal piece, and it's just laying flat all the way to where it indexes with the rear vertical. One kind of pro tip that we wanted to insert here. Sometimes riv nuts may not seat properly, and if you go try once or twice and the riv nut doesn't seem to be grabbing the actual van body and pulling the A-frame in tight, this tip can kind of help. That's what happened to us right here. The riv nut didn't seat. It seated in the orange piece itself. We drilled it out, tried a new one, and it didn't want to do that again. It probably had actually opened up the hole in the back where it needed to kind of attach to the van body. So we know it's seated in this orange piece properly to accept the L-track, and what we did was we, kind of found a good place where we could sort of tell what was going on behind the scenes, and we drilled a little 3/16 hole and put a pop rivet in there just to keep the piece, the A-frame piece, secure to the van and get it nice and tight together like it should be. When you do that, just make sure you're putting it off to the side a little bit, because remember the L-track is going to be bolting vertically along here. So you just want it to clear the L-track so it doesn't kind of push the L-track off from the surface.